For this closing plenary, we pull the threads of our conversations that we've had throughout the day together, and we ask, what will it take to scale Africa's nature economy over the next decade? What partnerships, innovations, and financing models must we invest in? And how do we turn momentum into lasting systems of change, driven by evidence and powered by collaboration? But before we start, I'd ask that we don't begin with data, but instead with a poem, because the work ahead in this closing plenary is not just about the technicalities of it. It's about soul, it's about connection, and remembering why we're here. So please help me to welcome on stage Steve Misati, a poet, marine conservation and founder of Youth Power, a Mombasa-based organization working to restore nature, protect oceans, and empower young people across Kenya.
Thank you so much. Am I audible enough? You know, I always thought I'm afraid of public speaking, only to realize I'm really afraid of the public audience. So please take it easy on me. I'm still a baby. But yeah, now we can start. Listen closely. Can you hear it? See, the land is speaking in rustling leaves. The push of roots through soil, it sprouts. Breath of trees feels refreshing and new. Restoration is our vow to heal and to renew. In this beautiful place where baobabs stand, from Kalahari's edge to Ethiopia's highland, the ground whispers, I'm not broken, only waiting. Waiting for the hands that know the soil's song and the voice that carries the wisdom so strong, and just policies that work, carved not in stone. Landscape leaders are rising like acacia after drought. Their roots so deep in community, their ancestors are so proud. They say, this land is ours to restore and to care, to steward with love, the spirit to share, from amazing Maasai's grazing plains to the Yoruba's shade. Let's guard our home, for our future is made. I love technology, and so innovation in the air is like electricity in a storm. Innovation in the air is like electricity in a storm. Yeah, okay. See, innovation in the air is like electricity in a storm. Digital strength is embraced in stories that hum. A farmer in Kenya shares yields with a click. A ranger in Zambia tracks poachers in a flick. Technology shouldn't be cold. It's part of our art that links our past to our futures, bright hearts. So I have a question to you. How many people here believe that dreams need fuel? Okay, I think I asked that using the poetic language, so I'll use the plain English. How many people here believe that dreams need support to be actualized? Oh, perfect. See, dreams need fuel, and finances is the way. It shouldn't be investment from pity, but hope's bright ray. Green bonds, community grants, wealth that flows like the River Nile's wide water where life strongly grows. Invest big in nature and dreams will take hold. Then see an economy that rises very green and bold. Can you feel it now? The pulse of our continent ready to take a leap. This is Africa's nature economy, and it runs so deep. The roadmap is drawn in roots, in codes, in courage. We innovate to restore. We definitely have an advantage. Stand with me still at this crossroad of time. Our ancestors are watching and our children are waiting in line. Will we answer with action or a decade of deed? For this is our breath, our shared need. To heal our heart is to heal ourselves, and to restore our land is to restore our shelves. So friends, let's plant the seed, then take on the fight, then pass on the tools and make things right. For this is our wake-up call, where the Africa's nature is our power, our call to innovate, to restore, and prosper for all. Thank you.
I think that needs a moment to settle in. And there's something Steve has said that I had to take down quickly. Invest big in nature and dreams will take hold. Don't forget that in whatever you're doing, you need to invest in nature. He has just reminded us that land speaks, people lead, and the future is already rooting itself in the present. Now, for the closing plenary, from vision to action, a roadmap for Africa's nature economy, we will be diving in the next hour into the priorities, partnerships, and practical steps to build an inclusive and resilient future. But just to take us off, or rather to kick us off, we want to begin at COP30, which will be hosted in Brazil, a key moment for the global South to align in around restoration and climate leadership. What's important is that a South-South cooperation grounded in urgency and solidarity for Africa will allow nature to thrive. So here is a message from Dr. Ana, the National Secretary for Climate Change in Brazil's Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and also the CEO of COP30, who's currently in Bonn for Substar via a pre-recorded video.
Everyone, I'm talking to you from Bonn. Unfortunately, I will not be able to be at the Global Landscape Forum in Africa, but I'm very much looking forward to learning from the discussions that you're going to have there. We hope at COP30 to really be a mark on how we're discussing landscapes and climate. We know the interlink between nature, landscapes, ecosystems, and climate, but up to now, the topic has not given the visibility that is needed. So by having the meetings you have in there, with the effort of COP30 presidency together, we can make COP30 a mark on how we debate landscapes from now to the future. Thank you.
I don't know if by the time you're leaving this place to go home, you'll remember how important this platform at GLF Africa has been. Just from what Dr. Anatoni was telling us, this is a platform for us to look at opportunities, ideas, and visions in advancing landscapes. And it's not just about that. It's also about, and I am speaking the words of now the COP president, Ambassador Andre Correa de Lago, who says, we can win by turning the game around. And how do we do this? We put into practice our political achievements and collective knowledge in the course of the next decade. And how do we do this? We need to align efforts across local and national governments. We need to work together from local to international markets. We need to work together from major technology to local innovation. And finally, put in academic knowledge and traditional knowledge. So thank you so much, Dr. Anatoni, for those words, and a reminder that this platform is very important. But we also have a special group of people who are extremely important, at least for me. For generations before us, nature has given us freely. We have air to breathe, we've had water to drink, we've had fertile soil. The currency of nature has never been about money, but its value has been immeasurable. Now more than ever, we must reincorporate the true value of nature and ecosystems into how we think about development, wealth, and the future. But to ground us in that vision, please help me in welcoming the GLFX chapter members from Nigeria, Chad, Zimbabwe, and Sierra Leone as they share the future they imagine, where nature economy is not just an exception, but the norm. Let's take a look.
For millennia, nature has provided us with abundance of blessings. Money is not its currency, but the fresh air we breathe every second, clean water we can't live without, to the soil that's nurtured our food, materials for clothing and housing, all for free. It is time to recuperate the value of nature and ecosystems into our economy. When we nurture, our lives are secured.
My name is Anna Obiakwe, and here in Calabar, Nigeria, we envision a world where we all prioritize conservation over extinction and empower community over exploitation. It's the future where sustainable forest management and sustainable fishing thrive, where mangrove ecosystem flourish to overcome floods and destructive climate effects, and where equitable benefit sharing and social justice prevail over greedy interests. That's our vision for a nature economy.
Je suis Gandabini Diabou du Tchad, un pays fortement touché par les effets du changement climatique, avec des sécheresses, des irrégularités de pluie, des chaleurs extrêmes, et avec surtout des fortes pressions humaines sur la biodiversité. Pour nous, il est essentiel d'adopter un modèle de développement fondé sur des solutions croisées, combinant l'agriculture durable, l'agroforesterie, l'élevage, où les déchets servent à régénérer aussi le sol. C'est cela l'économie fondée sur la nature.
My name is Mariam Kwajafa. Here in Kenema, Sierra Leone, our vision for a nature economy is one that rural farmers, women, and youth must be at the center, equipped with knowledge, tools, and fair market access. A just nature economy values our traditional wisdom and natural heritage, whilst ensuring development does not come at the cost of the environment or the rights of future generations.
Hello, I'm Blanche Wazanai Monda here in Harare, Zimbabwe. The nature economy we imagine is the one that sustains both people and ecosystems. By planting trees like the Musasa and the Munondo, we hope to enhance climate resilience while honoring traditional culture. Here in the near future, we also intend to make nature-based enterprises such as fruit processing, ecotourism, and sustainable wild harvesting more inclusive towards women, ensuring their voices are integral to the process.
Hello, my name is Matthew Idu. Here in Ibadan, Nigeria, our vision for a nature economy is one in which agroforestry restores land, improves soil and water, and boosts food security. We combine trees with farming as it supports biodiversity, empower rural communities, especially women and youth, build sustainable livelihood while protecting the environment and strengthening resilience to climate change.
So, we'd love to dive into the first panel of the evening, from pilots to scale. And in this panel, we'll explore how finance, innovation, and technology can unlock Africa's nature economy at scale. So please help me in welcoming two pioneering voices joining us virtually, Kate Callow, founder and CEO of Amini, and Rekia Fudel, founder and managing partner at Barker Fund. Kindly join me in welcoming them with a round of applause. Welcome, Kate. Welcome, Rukia. And just to start us off, you've both been doing extremely groundbreaking work in advancing Africa's development through finance and technology. For example, in your Kate case, from closing information gaps from smallholder farmers, and to you, Rukia, helping channel capital to climate entrepreneurs who are often left out when it comes to traditional investment structures. So starting with you, Kate, from your experience, what are some of the biggest lessons learned when it comes to transforming Africa's economy? And what lessons do you think we should carry forward?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. And sorry, I can't be in the room. I'm actually traveling. And I think that's a great question. And one of the biggest learnings that we've had over the past 3 years building Amini is that in all continents, human capital, natural capital, and what I would call digital capital are tightly linked. And if we want to be successful at transforming our nature economy, the roadmap should layer and include all three of those. Let me start with human capital first. Our farmers, our pastoralists, our communities are still very much the custodians of our natural capital. Then you go into natural capital, from agriculture to mining to energy. All of these are still pretty much the pulmon of our economies. And then you add on top of that the digital capital, where really you can't measure what you can't see. And data and AI play a pivotal role in unlocking some of those insights that we've never had access to before, bringing a level of transparency that really can restore trust in our ecosystem, as we're still operating in a place where trust is expensive. You know, data creates transparency, transparency creates trust, and trust accelerate investments. So this goes to benefit the farmers, the financiers, the large corporations, the government. It's quite of a simple equation. But in practice, very, very few people have really grasped that the same data that a farmer needs to be able to optimize for yields and understand weather pattern, that same data goes to an insurer to design better crop insurance product adapted to those farmers, or to an asset class manager, a financier, to invest into restoring specific ecosystem, or aggregate it at a country level to a government to better food security in their countries and improve climate resilience, or to a private sector company who is trying to transition the farmers in their supply chain towards more regenerative and sustainable practices. And it will only work, though, if we really start treating our natural capital as a core economic driver and as an asset class for our continent, with the potential of unlocking trillions in capital, and not only as a risk or a philanthropy or an impact initiative with short-term funding and patchy solution. It's going to require really collaboration across the entire value chain and a lot of accountability, so that the investments that are made are tracked, but we can also always tightly link them back to the impact that we aspire to make. And I'm confident that our continent, as a continent, we can make it, and things are starting to change.
Thank you so much for those remarks. I think one thing I'm taking with me, and I believe Rukia will be building on what you've just said, is that data, AI and data can enhance transparency and trust, which is very expensive right now. But for that to happen, we require a lot of collaboration and accountability. But over to you, Rukia. What are some of the biggest lessons learned when it comes to transforming Africa's nature economy, and what lessons do you think we should carry forward?
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Nairobi is one of my favorite cities, and I'm there often. But unfortunately, this time around, it didn't work out, so I'm not in Nairobi. But next time, I hope to join you in person. And thank you, GLF, for this opportunity as well. By the way, Maseke, before I go, are we invited to the reception? Because I heard you talk about a reception.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
We'll have a virtual version.
All right, okay. I just wanted to make sure. No, it's amazing to be here, and I was really inspired by the poet and some of the word that he said, and really the whole vibe and what we're talking about here, right? Really serious topic that affect all of the economy, but for some reason, all sector of the economy, but for some reason, nature or nature-based solution or restoration is always put to the background or put to the the nonprofit sector. And for someone I've spent my career in private sector, the idea was to figure out how does the private sector can come in and actually have an impact and be a lever of change and really quick, rapid change. And the best way we can do that is through investment, is to really bring in capital. Because as an investment banker in terms of my career and corporate financier, money moves the needle. And right, so when we meet young men and women who are building companies that have an impact on nature economy, that have a clear impact on making the environment better for all of us, we just get very excited and we look for all the reasons to support them. But I think that's what we're learning on our journey at Barca Fund for the last 3-4 years, right? The African nature-based solution, first of all, the opportunity is immense compared to other parts of the world is undervalued. We haven't even started to understand how much we can do and contribute to the global economy when it comes to the potential of businesses and startups that can be built on the continent based on nature-based solution. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, as an investment fund, we focus a lot on return, but learning very early that we need to be different in terms of how we think about return because it takes time, right? We want trees to grow to restore land, but it takes time for trees to grow. So we can't expect our investment to come in 2 or 3 years after investment. And so having a different mindset from the get-go, or even the way that we structure our investment into companies, right? And having really a blended approach is really what has been also our learning approach. And it's not just about providing investment capital that will allow companies to go and buy equipment and buy raw material and hire a team, but also potentially grants that can help them measure the impact that they're creating from an environmental perspective and really be a showcase of all the solution that they're able to scale. So I think that's been also an understanding that this idea of not looking at this from a traditional point of investing. The third thing has been really the opportunity. Nature-based solution across the world we know involves agriculture, involve manufacturing. That's where our raw material comes from, right? Every sector of the economy can be influenced by this, and understanding that and collectively collaborate with other people in the ecosystem will help us get there faster. I think at Barker Fund, we are an investment fund that from the get-go focus on impact on and investing in nature-based solution. As I said, we've taken a blended finance approach. We look at pre-investment readiness. And so because we invest really early, we look at supporting companies in pre-investment readiness, investing and post-investing across a $30 million fund size, of which we've already raised $17 million. And so we're excited to be given this opportunity by our donors to go and actually prove the model that we can find startups, we can find nature-based solution on the continent and support so that we be able to also scale as a fund, right? Because we are an entrepreneur as well, trying to prove to the world that this can work and especially it can work with African founders. So I think that's what kind of makes our place in this ecosystem unique because we're proving to the rest of the world that this can be funded, it can be financed, and it can have positive long-term impact.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rikia. And class, we are still in class. We need to take notes. I need us to note that one thing that has come out clearly so far, collaboration has just been mentioned again. But 2 points from what Rikia has said. The private sector can be an agent of change by investing. However, they need to be different in defining return. But now let's look at data a little bit and a quick note for the classroom on why data matters today. So Africa's nature economy in general cannot thrive without reliable data. And there's nothing we can do that can thrive without data. Data drives smart decisions, it welcomes investment, it informs innovation, and it ensures that solutions match the real needs of the communities where the solution is trying to be applied. Yet, 65% of Africa as a continent lacks adequate ground data. Amini, where Kate is the founder, is tackling this by using AI to generate real-time high-quality environmental data, supporting farmers, ecosystems, and sustainable markets. So Kate, to you, and just with regards to my preamble, how can Africa build a data-rich, inclusive, and accessible AI ecosystem?
So I think to a certain extent, we need to deconstruct and reconstruct how we've been thinking about what driving AI innovation means, you know? You mentioned that 65% of the continent is lacking ground truths. I want to bring in another stat where only 2% of Africans' data gets processed on the African continent. Let that sink for a minute. That means that 98% of our data is actually outside. And today, there's been a lot of biases that have been created that basically have put it outside this framework that driving AI innovation means building the largest supercomputer in the world and building the largest general purpose model in the world. And I think on our side, we need to really go back to first principle and invest and redefine what race we want to run and what does this mean, rather than aspiring to catch up with a race that was not created for us. And like you mentioned, this is going to require efforts from the entire ecosystem. And we will have to tackle this both from tops down to bottom up. On one side, starting to build the critical infrastructure. You know, as a company, we didn't start it by thinking we're going to build a data infrastructure company. I had a bit of a naive vision, thinking I'm going to build an AI company for Africa and I'll focus on environmental issues because these are the most important. But actually, we realized the data doesn't exist or can't be accessed. So we had to build the infrastructure that we needed to build those solutions, because we thought that if we were facing that problem, our entire ecosystem was facing the problem as well. So why don't we solve for ourselves so that we can solve for other developers and other startups across the continent? So building before critical infrastructure meant building a road, building a hospital. Today, it means building data infrastructure so that people can actually take that data and build solutions for their countries and their communities. When we think about sovereignty as well, there's a lot of questions around AI and data sovereignties that are coming up in the picture. I think we also need to think about owning and controlling our own data. For me, this is what it truly means. And not just adopt solutions that are built elsewhere to scale on the continent, but really looking at it as, can we solve challenges that are really pervasive across our communities and our countries, and starting from solving a problem first rather than trying to apply a solution first. And that's how we will really create the next generation or support the next generation of entrepreneurs on our continent and create an economy that's data rich and that can benefit our people and our planet.
Thank you so much. I think it's really important when we talk about owning and controlling our own data, because the only way you'll be able to make certain decisions or move a certain way is when you have ownership, not just a stake in it, but actual ownership. Rekia, I'd just love to build on Kate's conversation with looking at your own work, where you are defining the climate finance landscape in Africa by bridging a very key gap that a lot of people tend to miss out on. You're supporting startups that are too big for microfinance and too small for traditional investors. So what fiscal or policy tools can governments adopt to accelerate private investment in restoring nature-positive development?
It's funny, I often get this question from the government side and the fiscal and incentive and regulatory ideas. And I always struggle because I spend my whole life in the private sector, and I commend the work of people on the government side. It's difficult. I live in Africa myself, and I understand it. I am from the continent, and I understand it. But I do have ideas. I think just because I'm not from that sector doesn't mean I can't have a contribution. But again, this is just ideas that for me make sense as someone who's come from the private sector, right? And what has always worked in the private sector is incentives, right? As a banker, you're incentivized to work hard and work 15, 20 hours a week because it's linked to your bonus, right? So if government wants to have an impact really quickly, one of the things they can do is make sure their incentive links to being a green entrepreneur, in my opinion, right? Again, very humble opinion. Incentive used to land restoration, right? So for me, those are some of the small wins that we can see on a global level, on the government level, on the regional level, however we start, maybe on the city level, where incentive, for example, a green tax credit can be potentially implemented so that we can have more young men and women who are building ventures think about these things as important for building their companies. But again, these are, easy to say, but I can imagine not easily implemented. The other thing that we're very good at, and this is because my upbringing and my education is mainly from the US, is telling success story, right? Everyone will have you believe today that every investor in Silicon Valley is a billionaire, but that is not true. We know that 9 out of 10 companies also fell in the US, right? And startup fell in the US, but yet there's a lot of capital being built into this sector because there's one or two success story that we know about that is amplified. So I think one of the things that also the government and our allies can do is really amplify success stories of what does it look like to be a green entrepreneur. What are these startups that looks like that have started with maybe just small capital and now are making millions of dollars a year in revenue that people like us as investors will be interested in to be able to support so that they can continue to scale. So I think those are the two things I can think of, again, that can potentially, low-hanging fruits. Let's talk about the success story. Let's support and amplify the success story. And that has to come also from support from the government and policy worker in the way that they talk to us about the work that they do and they disseminating the information.
Absolutely. Maybe for everybody who's in this room, I think we all can attest to the benefits of storytelling. A success story about what you're doing in your country is what moves conversation from Zimbabwe to action in Zambia, from South Africa to Nigeria. When we constantly talk about what we're doing, we move from climate inaction to climate action, and we do it again collaboratively together. But because I don't want to take too much of your time, I'd just love to ask one final question. What is the one thing that you'd ask of us to carry forward as we work to scale Africa's nature economy? Kate, over to you.
So you mentioned scaling across African countries. I want to even mention more scaling across the global South. We really have an opportunity as Africans to catalyze a major change across that entire region, and this is what's driving us at Amini. We all gave up on careers in big tech abroad to come back home and build something for our people and do what many things is impossible, create deep technology that has a positive impact and that can be exported to the world. I'm actually in Barbados today, calling from Barbados, where we have a couple of projects here, but we're also expanding in Brazil, in Nepal, in Cambodia. So it is happening. And I want all of you to know that we have to create the framework we're creating today, have to ensure that African founders should never feel compelled to go work abroad for an opportunity. And those changes that we're building for the nature economy will ensure that building at home on problems that matters to our community and our planet is not just an option, but is actually the best option for us. And that's how we will be able to secure a place at the forefront of innovation globally.
Thank you so much. Rukia, over to you.
Right. So no, I think one of the things I will leave everyone with in the room, if there are young men and women in there that are startups, founders, that are entrepreneurs, that are thinking about, potentially getting into this sector, please do. The opportunity is immense. Everyone is excited about nature-based solution, and you can't do without it, right? The time is now. It's urgent. When you hear about some of the degradation cases on the continent, but then the potential for land restoration and the potential for the future. So I'll say, getting to it. The other thing is also understand that it's not rocket science, right? And that's been our biggest learning, being a climate investor on the continent, right? Typically, when you hear about a climate startup in the U.S. or anywhere else, it's usually tech startup. Somebody's inventing something that's going to go into the sky and get the carbon from the sky and store it under the ocean, which is amazing, which is great. We want that. But in the context of Africa, we're talking about nurseries. We are investing $200,000 into a Rwandan company that she's a green thumb. She described herself as a green thumb, but she has an amazing business model. right? She produces seedlings and she's going to help plant 500,000 trees. That is nature, right? We can do this on the continent. We need more young men and women to know that this is possible, right? And we want that company to grow and become multi-million dollars in many years, right? Land restoration initiative, right? Even if you don't know, get to know it. How do you build a business model, a for-profit business model that can attract patient capital, such as Barker Fund and others, right? So you can scale and build something of value for yourself and the community, right? We have this business model that we've come across called Aggregator Plus. We're talking about typical aggregators that we all know in our community forever. There's always been someone who goes on the land and work with smallholder farmers and aggregate, whether it's avocado, mangoes, moringa, shea. We know these commodity trees, and then sells it. But beyond just aggregating, once they get on the land, they help the farmer restore land. They help the farmer learn techniques for sustainable agriculture. They help the farmer by providing seedlings, by bringing back seedling to the land. And so for us, those are business model worth paying attention to. And how can we support them at their level to be scaled? So it's exciting work. It's not rocket science. So be excited that you can build businesses, multi-million dollar businesses. Yeah, right. We have a company in Ghana. She went from $100,000 to $1 million in 1 year in revenue, aggregating shea nuts.
Yeah.
Right. And shea nuts come from the shea tree. And so it's really exciting to kind of think about these business models that exist that are being put on the side because everybody's thinking about tech. No offense, Kate. Tech is important and AI, but then there's solution that we can all be excited about that us on the continent can do at scale with many young men and women taking them up and building these businesses. At the end of the day, as investor, we invest in founders. And so when we find these founders that are doing this incredible work, first, we're very humble. We really do appreciate what it takes to build these businesses in the context, in the continent. But we're excited about the prospect of helping them scale this impact that they're creating, and also grow their company and earn for profit, create wealth for themselves and their community.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And the thing, when it comes to finance innovation, we can never have enough of that conversation. But at this point, I'd just like to thank Kate and Rekia for their contributions. May we give them a round of applause at this time. But moving away from finance and innovation, we want to look at policy, strategy, and leadership. So please help me in welcoming our panelists on stage. First, we have Dr. Solange Bandiaki Baji, the President and Coordinator of Rights and Resources Initiative. Welcome. Second, we have Philip Kilonzo, the Head of Advocacy, Policy and Communications at Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, as well as Melin Abisa, Inuka Project Coordinator, Youth for Nature. So there's a very clear need for us to govern our land more fairly, protect our forests, reshape our value chains, and invest in community stewardship. But the question that we still have to ask ourselves is, how do we move from conversation to commitment? How do we move from momentum to mechanism? And to kick off this panel, I'd like us to do it differently this time. I'd like to invite not just our speakers, but the audience as well to share your reflections and contribute to the question, what concrete steps are critical to move closer to a truly inclusive, community-led African nature economy? Now, I'm looking for the Slido link. So for the audience, I'd love for you to scan this Slido link and tell us what concrete steps are critical to help us to move closer to a truly African nature economy. But for now, let's hear from our panelists. Melin, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. And that's a very nice question. And I would say that first, we need to create enabling ecosystems that support, the people to actually do more of their restoration and also tap into nature-based economies. Because one thing for sure is that policies without people is just poetry. And so because we need to create policies that are working for the people, are for the people and by the people. And through this, we will be able to do more of the restoration work because the policies are also encouraging the people to do more action. Second, we also need to decentralize funding to actually support the people and capacity build the youth and the communities, because finance without frontline leadership by the community is also just fiction. How can we ensure that people are actually leading on these solutions and actually working on these solutions at a scale for both their livelihoods and also for ecological, protection and also growth and for it to thrive? And also maybe I can add on the aspect of storytelling. We have really heard powerfully from Rakia that stories move, stories are able to lead people from inaction to action. So how can we transform these stories to actually lead more on change and inspire people to do more action? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melin, for those opening remarks. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you. Thank you for this particular opportunity. I think in terms of policies, when you look at the landscape of policies in Africa, that is where you get a bit perplexed. Whether it's the land policy, whether it's the wildlife conservation policy, whether it's the forest conservation policy, it's a policy without people. People come in as an addendum. And that is the first big challenge that we have. And therefore, an decolonial approach to the policies that we have in Africa becomes quite an imperative. Just to shock you that Africa is meant to provide the resources that are actually meant for global decarbonization in terms of critical minerals. But if you come back to the continent of Africa, you'll find all the mineral resources that are important for just transition have all been locked into global corporates who are actually exporting all those minerals. All the way up to 2032, most of the countries that are producing these critical minerals have no stake in those critical minerals. So how do you talk about nature premising the economy on natural resources in Africa when the minerals are not with us? Quite a fundamental question. And when you look at even right now, the current attempts to help in global decarbonization through the carbon markets is also, again, placing the lives of Africans at stake. Human rights violations are increasingly becoming quite rampant in areas where those forests are being conserved. But more usefully, again, we have countries that are locked in cases with other global corporates who have already concessioned portions of land as carbon sinks in the spirit of demonstrating their decarbonization agenda. So these are things that we must look at from a policy perspective. But Africa must be also truthful to its own policy ecosystem. Africa is a continent that develops policy visions that it doesn't honor. The first, and what is also important, is to highlight the water vision. Because you cannot talk about biodiversity conservation, dealing with the desertification, climate change, without fixing the water. Africa has a water vision that it never implemented. It has an African mining vision that it never implemented, which is also a bold statement. It provides bold statements, but it has never been implemented at all. So you begin to ask, whose policies are you developing and for what purpose, if you are not really prepared to implement those policies to the latter? But coming to the climate conversation, then Africa must find its true north in terms of position in the negotiation and the dialogue that it's advancing. Look at climate finance, for instance. What is actually being dangled in Africa is our ox. It's a joke. It's a joke in the sense that the funding is adopting a private sector model. It is not community-driven. Where it comes through the party-state relationships, and rarely does it trickle to communities. These are policy constructs that we must look at, and we must begin to look at from an implementation perspective. How do we breathe reality to policy implementation? Connecting basically things that are important for us, the biodiversity conservation, the desertification, and the climate action together in one realm from a policy perspective. Thanks.
Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Solange.
Well, we have all heard that about the Africa resource curse. We all have been saying Africa has lots of resources, but Africa is poor. There is one Senegalese famous writer who said, Africa is a beggar sitting on a gold mine. Let's just all close our eyes a little bit and think about that where we're sitting right now, we're sitting under lots of gold. What would we do? I'll just unpack this quote by using the natural resource wealth that Africa has, and I'm gonna cite just few countries. If you take the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, DRC produces 70% of the world's cobalt. Niger is the world's largest producer of uranium. Guinea have almost half of the world's bauxite reserves. Gabon and South Africa, they are the two main manganese producers in Africa. Mali and Burkina Faso, they're the world leading producer of gold. We also know that Africa has the second largest forested regions in the world, which is the Congo Basin. And the main question is, how come Africa has all these resources and is still begging for development aid? Africa has been blessed with all these resources. So what do we need to do? Maybe three things, and just complementing what my predecessor had said. One is around governance of natural resources. How do we really focus on that? Make sure it's based on transparency, equity, fairness, but also recognize the rights of the communities, of the indigenous peoples. How can we make sure that Africa's relationship with the West or the private sector is based on a win-win situation? We all know that the West has the technology, but we have the resources. So that should put Africa in a very powerful bargaining position. And last, also, how do we move away from the colonial and capitalist mindset of extractivism and make sure that we can promote sustainable use of resources? And I'll stop there.
Wow. So I've been trying to weave through the three conversations because all of them are very important. Africa is a beggar sitting on a gold mine. But for Africa to move away from that position, Africa must discover its true north. And that's through governance, recognizing the rights of communities and ensuring we get a win-win situation. But even then we go deeper and we have to accept that funding must be decentralized. There's so much to take home today. But before we go to the next set of questions, perhaps we can just read a few comments on the Slido link to see what the audience is saying. I hope we typed something out. Don't let me down at this point. So based on what you've had today and your own work, what concrete steps do you see as most critical to move us toward your vision for Africa's nature economy? Decolonize development. Center on people and not profit. Put women at the center. Make green careers real, jobs that protect our future and pay the bills. There are so many things that are coming up, but let me sum up with Africa is not poor. Her land, resources, and all that have been stolen from, and all that are being stolen by colonialism and neocolonialism. So much insights, but let's have that conversation over at the reception. So to you, Melin, I'd love to ask a question from your experience. What are some of the most promising models of community-led restoration you've seen at Youth for Nature?
Okay, some of the most promising, I will speak about Inuka. This is a program, an NBS program that is focused on training youth to understand their respective NBS solutions that they're doing in their different ecosystems, mentoring them on how they can, improve and also be more experts in their field, and also providing funding to help them scale their solutions and to be able to tap into nature-based economies. So through Inuka, I have seen good promises of how youth are actually revolutionizing their work in restoration, because we say Africa is the cradle of mankind. And so how can we do more of this restoration work and also tap into the livelihood aspects of these works that we are doing? I can give an example of one team in Mombasa that is doing mangrove restoration. And through this program, they have been able to tap into ecotourism. They have created a boardwalk within the mangrove. And so when you visit Mombasa and would want to experience mangrove nature, bird watching, have a mud bath, be familiarized with the mud and the salt of the ocean, you can even go and experience this. And this is a way of creating livelihood for the team. So as much as they're also doing restoration, they're also earning through these restoration activities. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melin. And you bring out a very important point that sometimes we tend to forget. Youth have to be at the center, because the youth are not the leaders of tomorrow, they are the leaders of today. I want to tell you something. There's nothing as beautiful as hearing a round of applause when you're done talking. I just need you. So over to you, Dr. Solange. What institutional reforms around land tenure and public policy coherence are critical to ensure indigenous groups can lead and benefit meaningfully?
I would just say that land rights are the foundation for Africa's nature economy. If you look at the critical minerals that we have been talking about today, more than half of all the critical mineral projects are located either near or on indigenous and community lands. We also know that most of the lands in Africa are legally owned by government or the private sector. But the communities and the indigenous are claiming to own more of this, which is true. What do we need to do now? Or at least what do we know also? We know that land in Africa are governed by customary systems. The communities also rely on the land for their livelihoods. And the land is tied to identity and tradition. That's what land means for Africans. It's beyond just like, money. So I think if we start with that perspective, that will really help us see what kind of Africa's nature economy do we need. With all of that, I think it's good to really start thinking about how do we tap into indigenous and community-led solutions and livelihood models. There are many out there, but they're all untapped opportunities or untapped powers. If we invest in communities, that's where I think Africa will really start seeing that the local economy will bring the national economy to a certain level. So what do we need to do is we need to fund it. We need to fund indigenous and local community land and livelihood projects. We need to scale it. Like I said, there are many examples, but scaling is an issue. But also we need to let communities lead the way.
I think sometimes the wisdom is flowing too much and you're still writing and you're like, could we have a little bit more? Do we have a little bit more? But two things that are very critical from Dr. Solange's input is investing in communities, especially indigenous communities, funding them and letting them take lead. It's not about getting into their land and making decisions for them, because they know best the experiences that they go through there. So let's let communities lead. But before we conclude, I'd love to hear from Philip. And my question to you is, as we think about institutionalizing partnerships and commitments, can you share some tangible examples where coalition building has successfully driven systems change across landscapes?
Thank you so much. I want to start from where Dr. Slange left. And when we talk about grounding everything on movements, before I come to the coalitions, because we must look at where are the coalitions premised. The coalitions are premised on mobilizations from below and mobilizations around people. And it's about people and their collective power driving the transformative agenda, but more usefully also framing the vision, framing the mission. Because most of the times we usually build coalitions at top here, and we forget to premise the coalition building process within the visions of people. I've been involved in quite a number of movement building processes, which are hinged on experiences of communities from below. One is when I was with ActionAid, we worked on Women to Kilimanjaro, which was actually a women land rights pursuit. A lot of information is available on that in the internet in terms of the mobilization from below and the coalition around institutions that came up to support the cause as part of building that momentum. While in Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, we worked on what we were calling the Climate Justice Torch. The Climate Justice Torch was about ensuring that we are able to mobilize all the constituents, indigenous people, fisher folks, women, youth, among other constituents, to drive a much more profound agenda, grounded on their realities and their experiences and their aspirations, but more important, supported by coalitions from across Africa and beyond, in the spirit of ensuring that we are able to push COP27 to adopt the loss and damage agenda, which was quite important to us, and COP28 presidency to ensure that the fund is operationalized within that particular space. And that is a process that we were able to spearhead out of the process. Out of the lessons that we generated in these two instances, we said it is indeed important to have an institutionalizing processes, even for communities and even for the local people. And that is when we came up with the non-state actors platform around the Africa Climate Summit 1. And the non-state actors platform around Africa Climate Summit 1 build what we can actually describe as clusters of interest, clusters of constituents, comprising the women, the youth, the indigenous people, the farming community, among others, 14 of them. They are available in our literature. You can actually make reference. And that became basis of not only mobilizing their voice from below, but also consolidating their voice for the voice to count within the Africa Climate Summit itself. And going now to Africa Climate Summit 2, it is the same framework, more amplified, which has actually been accepted by the Ethiopian government as a way of convening towards that. Very finally, I'll invite you to two processes as part of also coalition building, actually three processes. The first is linked to Belem, because again, it will connect with the Addis Ababa process, which is very important, and conversations of the nature that we are having here must also manifest within that space. The second is global mobilization around economic justice. Within African space, we framed it as climate and economic justice campaign. The economic and climate justice campaign is meant to ensure that we don't leave elements that are also important to this process to bear into this. And then very finally, is the South-South collaboration, which is actually currently convened by Azerbaijan and which will also connect with Belem process. So I felt like it's important for this process and the outcomes of this process, informed by vision from below, to connect within those spaces. Thanks.
Thank you so much. How are we building coalitions? That's what Philip is asking us today. And we need to build them by mobilizing voices from below. Just before I ask for the final remarks from our speakers, we'd love to appreciate each and every one of you who has contributed to the visual piece that captures the wisdom shared by speakers and participants. So Everything you have been talking about, all the post-it notes you have put down have not been in vain. There are so many themes that are coming up that you'll be able to access just after the conference and see where best you'd like to continue this collaboration on. But at this juncture, I am deeply saddened to ask for final reflections from our speakers. Do we want to go for reception or do we want to carry on? Okay, we will continue with the reflections at the reception. So just in 1 minute, what is your call to action for transforming Africa's nature economy? Starting with you, Melin, your call to action.
Okay, my call to action will be to invest more in nature-based solutions or nature-based economies, because that is reclaiming our future. You know, through tapping into, you know, from the various speakers, how much resources we have as Africans and in our land. You know, we need to tap into this nature-based economies, because this is reclaiming our future and also creating a more sustainable future for us and also our generation that is coming. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melin. Over to you, Dr. Solange.
So my vision for Africa's nature economy is an economy that is based on African resources, a prosperous Africa based on our own resources and not based on development aid. We don't need development aid anymore. We have the resources that we need to have a prosperous Africa. I would like also to see Africa's nature economy led by communities and rooted in indigenous knowledge and practices.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Philip.
Let me not share the vision because Dr. shared my vision very clearly. But if you were told to count your money and you started to count the money, and then the oxygen that you were breathing is switched off immediately, you are likely to stop counting the money. But we are operating in a state where the economy has been given more prominence over nature. Yet nature sustains the economy, and we need to undo that. And for us to undo that, we need to look at the $7 trillion that is actually being pumped in destructive activities that are actually destroying nature, and they stop that. Thanks.
If you've forgotten most of the points, I'd like you to just take 2 points with you today. We have the resources that Africa needs to scale. We just need to tap into them. With that, please help me to give a beautiful round of applause to this panel. That has been extremely enriching for us all.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
As I quickly hand back to the MC, just before I hand over to you, may I request that I invite, awesome. Thank you very much. So there has been a lot that we can take home from this session. But if there are 2 things I can request of you is to remember collaboration and accountability. We will go very far as a continent when we are observant and respectful of indigenous communities and take into account what they require as we scale Africa's nature economy. But without taking too much time, I'd love you to help me welcome on stage Dr. Elian Ubalijoro to deliver the closing keynote address.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a really powerful day. And I know we're going to be heading to the reception. And earlier today, we talked about not wanting to be on the menu, but at the table. So for everybody joining us online, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. This has really been an incredible day. I'm so inspired by our speakers and by the energy in the room. Isn't it incredible what we can do when we come together? I want to first give a special thank you to our donors, partners, and sponsors for making GLF's work and GLF Africa 2025 a success. These include the government of Germany through BMZ, BMU, and ICI, the government of Luxembourg, the Food Systems Land Use and Restoration Impact Program, the Global Environment Facility, the Robert Bosch Foundation, and the International Model Forest Network in partnership with the Government of Canada. Thank you to the 77 event partners, 35 partner members, the GLF Africa Knowledge Committee, and our valued media partners. Thank you as well to the session hosts. Weren't they amazing? Our dedicated volunteers, social media ambassadors, GLF team on the ground, and participants. And a deep thank you to our audience online. You have contributed from around the world, and our conversations were all richer for it. Finally, thank you to all C4 ICRAF staff, including a special thank you to communications, operations, IT, and last but not least, Peter Marunga and the security team. It has truly been a joy to connect with all of you here on our campus. Together, this campaign has reached over 10 million people on social media. We've had nearly 400 people here in Nairobi and 2,000 join online from 118 countries. And as the connections we've made today take on a life of their own, this number, and more importantly, our impact keeps growing. What we have accomplished in this one-day event so far, we've seen an unmatched unity and readiness to redefine Africa's present and future to one that works for its local and indigenous communities and nature. We absorb the wisdom of thought leaders, entrepreneurs, scientists, financiers, local community, indigenous peoples representatives, and practitioners. And we've discussed solutions to the intricate and interrelated problems facing Africa. The message and supporting evidence are clear. The potential of Africa's natural capital is unparalleled, and we must tap into it. Financing is critical. When we invest in inclusive value chains, nature-based solutions, people, and landscapes, we not only unlock sustainable finance flows, we also create green jobs and open economic opportunities, connecting the microeconomy to the macroeconomy. And our speakers and participants have shown us the way. By combining multiple forms of knowledge, including indigenous knowledge and robust science, we can shorten the gap between knowledge and action. And as our all-female AI panel of changemakers has shown us, it is possible to build a roadmap for responsible AI on the continent. As we look to close today, I want us to reflect on how data turns into wisdom. When raw data is given meaning, it becomes information. When information is put into context, it becomes knowledge. And when knowledge becomes actionable and applied, only then does it become wisdom. That is the work we all need to do, to move into wisdom territory, to turn data into gold, to take all the thoughts and conversations from today into meaningful action anchored in wisdom. Africa already has immense natural capital. It's our responsibility to bring intelligence, meaning, and context towards a nature economy. The world is looking to the African continent to rise to the occasion. Today is just one day, but I hope it energizes the work we're already doing. I hope it sparks new ideas, partnerships, and more impact. And I hope it gives us collective strength, even in these uncertain times. This journey, as we build momentum toward the UN Climate Change Conference in Belém, Brazil, and beyond, continues. as we journey towards GLF climate and the 8th GLF investment case alongside COP30, may we drive and scale the real solutions you are already working on and ensure that the priorities, conversations, and outcomes we heard today are brought not only to the negotiation rooms, but also bring value for the indigenous and local communities around the world. As my hero Wangari Maathai once said, if we can send man to the moon, why can we not plant a tree? When we work together, our small efforts result in powerful collective change. I look forward to the next steps in the journey we've been walking together, the journey to transform Africa's landscapes, communities, and economies. Thank you so much for what you're already doing and the perseverance that is needed to keep going despite the obstacles. Keep going despite the darkness we encounter. We need your light. Keep shining. Thank you. Asante sana. Merci beaucoup.